My friend, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I'm
How are
Mark Sylvester. He's Dewey Freeman. I'm doing great. How are the horses?
horses are great. We're having a huge spring snowstorm.
Oh, nice.
Um, so they're hanging out in the barn. My horses can go in and out as they please, but on days like this, it's like they go hang out in the barn and munch on hay.
So yesterday was a full moon, and the day before that, the moon came up over the eastern horizon, over the water here in Santa Barbara, and I'd never heard this term before, but I mentioned it to someone because it was the most beautiful orange. It was staggering. And she said, "Oh, it's a pecan moon." I went, "What?" Because it was absolutely that color. The color of a pecan
Mhm.
was absolutely, and it was so like right when it comes up. Where the way Santa Barbara is situated, it's certain times of year the moonrise is incredible, and then last night was the full moon. But had you ever heard that term before?
I have never heard that term. I've heard blue moon. I've heard winter moon. I've heard hunter's moon. I've not heard that term. That's a pretty cool term.
I love that, and I love. We were coming home from our improv workshop on Thursday nights, and I saw it peeking between the trees, and so I diverted and drove home down by the water, and I
Mm.
just like, okay, here's a little treat for myself to be able to sit and watch this and enjoy this for a few minutes. And coming on the heels of the eclipse a few weeks ago, this notion that we are not alone is humbling.
Humbling and what word would I use? Actually, fulfilling is the word I would use.
Fulfilling. I like that. You know, we were talking before the show on words and words that there are words that when I hear someone use them, I get
Sure.
triggered. I exactly,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know,
Like inside you go, oh my God.
well, you know, because words matter, right? What we say matters, and so I thought we would talk about words today.
I love that idea. What you just said, it was like I say all the time, and I hadn't actually quite thought about it this way. What we say and how we say it is unbelievably important. And um, I'm not sure that I'm not sure that um, everyone actually really gets and understands that. So, um, so what words, just out of curiosity, um, like for lack of better words, Twitter pates you inside when you hear it, where you go, "Ugh."
As a storyteller and as someone who's in front of audiences a lot and pays it, I paid attention to words my whole life. I'm I think my radar is more finely tuned than most.
Mhm.
Not as finely tuned as others, but it's pretty finely tuned. I listen, I pay attention. Words are important to me. One of the words that gets me like I want to do a 20-minute talk as soon as I hear the word, and I need to edit myself because that's not cool. The first one that comes to mind is the word should.
Mm. So talk. We don't have 20 minutes to go for one word, but please expound
Well, I just
Like,
hear the word should, and I should do this, or I shouldn't do that, or I should. And I think that word has baked in meaning from now that as I'm thinking about it, someone told you what you should or shouldn't do in the past. And so that's a little story you tell yourself. Well, I should do this, or I should try harder. I should something. And I just say, erase, scramble that word, please. Put the word out. Don't use the word should. Like just do the thing or think about what you just said. Like
mhm,
really think about that. I should pay more attention. Okay, but just say, I'm going to pay more attention.
exactly.
Right.
The word should does two things for me. One is it's a judgment.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so instead of saying today at 10:30 I'm going to go work out. If I say I should work out at 10:30, there's an underlying judgment. There's always a backstory to should. What the backstory to should is that I didn't do it and I'm ashamed of it. So
Mm.
so I should clean up versus because there's an underlying level of shame in that instead of saying, well, I didn't clean up and now I'm going to. Which with that, there's not a judgment with it. But if I say I should clean up, the underlying message is, well, you should have done it before. Why didn't you do it now? What's wrong with you that you didn't do it? I mean, all of that kind of stuff.
Well, I hear a parent in there,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And a judgmental parent voice, not a parent voice that guides.
It would be interesting to for our listener to write these words down and just put them on a little piece of paper and then keep track for the week of how often you use it. When
Good
I
idea.
was 14 or 15, I had a summer job at a construction cleanup company where we went and cleaned up after each of the trades, the framers, the carpet guys, the painters, whatever. We cleaned up
Mhm.
after each one so it was clean for the next one. And my boss said, every time you use the word you need to put 25 cents in this jar. I stopped saying that summer. And I was very, very thankful that I had that um, awareness, because when you have to dig in your pocket a lot of quarter, uh,
Especially for a
or
14-year-old.
exactly, and she didn't miss a beat. Oh my gosh, did not miss a beat. And I was so glad I learned that lesson early. But I think that may have been, now that I think of it, the turning on my awareness of what I say and how I say.
So talk a little bit more about how important that is to you and to communication, because oftentimes I'll speak to when I'm working with people, how we say something is almost more important than what we say. And then there's also another underlying layer in there of what we say. And because even if I'm kind about saying, well, this should happen, what there's still a judgment under it.
So when you ask the how you say a word, I immediately think of the work we do at storytelling school.
Hmm.
And we think of what's happening as we're speaking is three different things: design, develop, and deliver. So design is what do I want to say? I'm strategically thinking about saying, and and that's unconscious to us.
Mm,
I'm what I'm doing. The develop is stringing together words, and I'm developing a sentence. I have a train of thought. I have a point I want to make. However, whatever that is, that's also unconscious. What we do is we develop a conscious practice of that. So you can create a story, create a talk, create a workshop,
mhm,
whatever. So we make it conscious. But the third one is interesting is deliver. Okay, now how am I going to deliver those words? How am I going to use pauses when I talk?
mm.
How am I going to punch a word to make it more emphatic? How do I deliver what I'm going to say? So, as soon as you said how you say it, I think you meant something different. But what I heard was what we do an exercise where we have someone, you've done this, take the first sentence of their talk and then word punch the different words in the sentence to get different meanings. So a sentence can feel, so the person who hears it, five different ways or more, depending on which word you punch. And by punch, I mean empl- I'm not getting the right word, which is kind of ironic, but which word you emphasize when you speak. So you can hear me doing that as I'm
Mhm.
doing it, and it makes everything different. So you design, what do I want to say? You develop, what are the things I'm going to say? And then you deliver. That makes all the difference in the world. And the more you can have conscious competence about that, the better of a speaker and a communicator you'll be, one on one on many.
Well, and thank you for that. And what you're speaking to is what I was talking about. I mean, part of it are the words we use, but we can use the same words and come up with different meanings. And and like whether you punch a word or whether you say a word more quietly or whether, you know, are what's happening in your body. I mean, one of the interesting pieces is what we know with the research around nervous systems is that when we speak in a melodic way
Hmm.
versus a monotone way, if we speak in a monotone voice, that actually activates our nervous system for danger. If we speak in a melodic way, that activates our nervous system for safety. Yeah, I know it's crazy.
Wow. Wow.
And then in that process, the words that we use in that exacerbate what happens. So, um, if my speech was always like this, and I said, Mark, I care about you very much, what happens?
I go to sleep.
Exactly. It's like there's nothing that will draw you in because I really want to draw you in, and you're my very best friend, and this is really great being with you. Versus going, Mark,
Yeah. Right. Your face is different right
absolutely
now, by the way.
amazing to be with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So, or even if I use the exact same words. So, the other thing that we often use is we put in words that are judgmental, like should. Oftentimes, we use one of the words, sort of my big word of going, let's try and stay away from that one, is the word just because it's demeaning.
Oh, it
And
just made it.
well, that's a different usage of it. But if I say, um, and this, Kimberly and I talk about this and around looking at bird species, and one of the most popular bird species are robin, which robins are throughout the entire U.S. And people will go out and they go, well, I didn't see any birds. I just saw a robin. Instead of, it's like, well, I saw a yellow shafted flicker. Nobody says, well, I just saw a yellow shafted flicker. Well, it was just a robin. Or I'm just, you know, I'm just not very good at that. Or I'm just an amateur. Or I'm just a white belt. Those words are demeaning to us.
So you had said something earlier that the word is it has judgment attached to it. And so justice feels like that's a word that has judgment attached to it.
Yes.
So these words to avoid, are they, I wonder if that's something they all have in common, is that they have uh, inherent judgment in them.
That's a good question. In my gut, that would feel right. Like should, just,
Can't, won't,
yeah, I can't. Um,
only.
ooh, yeah.
Your face just went, oh, no.
Well, part of what happens, this is interesting. I like what you're saying here about the judgment piece, because if somebody says to me, well, I should do this, but I just can't, but if I only tried,
Hmm. That's a power packed sentence or two.
exactly. It's like, I don't know what they're saying. I don't know what are they saying, they want help? Are they saying that they've attempted something and they only got partway there? Are they saying they're not going to do it anymore? I don't know what they're saying.
So I have one more that I get popped on mostly in improv, which is interesting. It's I versus we.
Mm,
And we makes what I'm talking about us, I makes it about me.
right.
And as a speaker, so this is in the context of speaking and or performing or things, it's to make it about us, right? So the pronouns of my speech are us and we, and
Hmm.
and rather than I. And that was the note I got last night as I introduced a young man I've mentored since he was 16, and he was having an album release party, and his mother texted me yesterday morning and said, "Would you please introduce Jackson this evening?" And I was
What an
honored,
honor.
and it was, and the first thing that went through my mind is, okay, when I stand up there, I have to tell a story, or Kimberly's going to have issues with me.
Or you'll be walking home, I think is what you're really trying to say.
And it's so I wrote a talk, very short, like 5 sentences, that I thought would be good. And I gave it to her, and she goes, "Why is this all about you?" I was like, "How is it about me? I'm telling a story about my interaction with him and his path and things he's learned." And what it got down to it took a little while, but what it got down to was if I just changed the word I to we, it changed the whole sense, the whole feeling of it. And when I'm standing up there, because I'm not going to read this thing, I'm going to say it. And was only 6 or 7 hours old. It was we. And someone came up to me in the intermission and said, "That was one of the most amazing introductions. Thank you so much." And I was like, huh. Because I told a story, right?
Mhm.
I told a story. But I and we. So what I'd like to do is, now that we've raised the awareness of a couple of words and just the whole this notion of how we talk about words, what's the prescription now that we've someone's done the diagnosis? Oh, I do that a lot. What's the prescription to change?
Very good question. The prescription from my perspective, and as you were talking about I versus we, um, the and I'm going to tie this together in just a second. Many people will also use the word you. Well, you know that if you go to the store, you really have a hard time finding a parking place, and they're really talking about their own experience. The prescription, from my perspective, is what are you actually trying to say? And are your words doing that for you? If I'm talking about you, then, and that's what I'm really trying to say, then I do need to use the word you. If I'm talking about some experience I have, where then I want to use the word I. If I'm talking about something collective, then I want to use the words we and us. But one of the pieces that I really, as I'm thinking about this here, oftentimes I'll talk about the concept of I thou
Yes.
relationally
Mm.
versus I it, which is no relational. It's not relational. It's objectification. So what I think we're maybe really talking about is, are we able to speak in a I thou perspective, and are we able to hold that and know what we're and have some awareness of what we're trying to say? Because when you changed your wording in your introduction last night, it's you went much more inclusive, and you went into full I thou process, is what I'm hearing. Would that be correct?
100% correct. And it reminds me, I'm going to go back to the 3Ds that I talked about: design, develop, and deliver. And those who have listened to the show will know that I love little sets of words that start with the same letter, not for the alliteration as much as for the ability for me to remember them. This just makes it easier for me. So that's
Yep,
why I do it. And hopefully it makes it easier for other people. But the design is, what do I want from this communication?
exactly.
Right. And I think that we often don't think about what we want from the communication. We just go right into talking without taking just a beat. What do I want? Am I trying to influence how someone feels? Am I trying to communicate a command? Am I trying to elicit someone's response? Like, what do I want to happen from this? And it reminds me of being taught effective communication when I was young in my career. And the very first thing the first thing of the five things was, what's the goal of this communication?
Hmm.
And that was 30 years ago that I had there. I was in a workshop, and it was an hour long part of a 3-day deal, but I've never I use it all the time. Like, what do I want? What's our intention? And we hear about people, we hear this a lot, right? Set an intention, right?
Right.
We, but I don't know that people have thought about it to the point of what's the intention of just the small interaction I'm going to have with someone, right? When I'm using my words and picking my
Mhm.
words. So what's interesting to me is how we can take all of this stuff we've talked about, and that can all occur within a 2 minute or less interaction with someone.
So I'm in full agreement with you. When you have an intention, generally, what is that? Or does that vary for you?
It's different every time.
So what that means when you say that, what that means then is that we cannot speak habitually,
Amen.
and that
Amen.
our habit needs to become the awareness of what our intention is, the awareness of what we're trying to communicate versus the habit of, well, I'm just going to say this because I've said it this way 500,000 times, and I'm going to let you figure out what I'm trying to say instead of me having the intention of knowing what I want to say to you.
Here's a great example. Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Both were so you and I will understand this, but I don't know that our younger audience will understand this. But do you know what in radio terms, we don't even barely have radio anymore. Do you know what a cart is or was? It's
Say that.
short for a cart, C-A-R-T. So it was short for cartridge. And if you
Oh, yeah,
would
yeah,
go
yeah.
into you would go into the
Hmm.
radio, they would have banks of these, and
Hmm.
the disc jockey or whoever was running the thing would pull the carts, and you'd have a commercial on a cart, you'd have a something else on it, because
Right.
things that were gonna be replayed over and over, and you would line the carts up, and then you would trigger them, and they would play the things. And I remember the first time I saw that, and is subsequently the visualization that happens in my mind when someone gives me an automatic response is that, oh, they just have a tape,
It just
they just
pulled
hit
up.
the play button.
Right.
They just hit the play button. It's an automatic response. And which is why the third TED commandment is tell a story you've never told before, to avoid that automatic, oh, I've given this talk 10,000 times. It is now devoid of emotion. I'm going to stand on the TED stage. I'm going to give the same talk I've given over and over and over. And Richard, at the very beginning of uh, Ted said, we don't want that. I want a story you've never told before.
Mm.
So that's that intention, right?
Yes. So, question with that. What happens when we tell a similar story, or but we actually change some of the details of the story? And I'm not talking about making it up. I'm talking
I
about
understand.
like enriching it or going, wow, I told that story and this particular part seemed a little, it didn't transmit what I was trying to get transmitted. Um, do you consider that a new story? What?
No. Uh, I think of story because I'm constantly working on stories, and
Mhm.
I've got stories in my back pocket all the time. And you can imagine the one, oh, I've heard him tell this story. You have that friend who tells this story. Everybody knows exactly what I'm
You
saying.
mean the same three jokes at every?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I quickly check in when I'll say, oh, if I've told you this, just stop me,
Mhm.
right? So it's okay to stop me. I believe that a story, which is a recounting of some incident in your life, right? It's
Okay,
a
some
something that
event.
happened, right?
Mm,
Something that happened. And you went through some struggle and you got out of that struggle and you now have a lesson or something to tell us as you learned after going through that. Whatever it was, it made me happy. It was really funny. I laughed. We had a good time. There's always some kind of conclusion, right? We tend to overanalyze, not overanalyze. We analyze stories to see are we getting those parts so that you communicate them. We have the idea that a story can deliver multiple lessons and you can pick and choose the lesson that you
mm,
want for that given moment.
got it.
That's one thing, right? So it
Mhm.
might be a lesson of resilience, it might be a lesson of perseverance. There may be one thing that happened that once you think about it, this is part you want to do, is oh gosh, I want to pull out that part. Like I wasn't the reason things failed, I wasn't prepared because I wasn't paying attention. That's the part I want to tell on the story. That's one part of it. The other is to we believe I'm not telling the story because I want to tell a story. I'm telling the story because you need to hear this.
I love that. My whole body just sort of settled when you said that. So, would you share with the audience how you form that? And when you are saying, I'm telling a particular story because you need to hear this story, how do you how do you come to that um, so that for lack of a better word sort of fits?
It gets back to intention. And it also gets back to the question Kimberly and I ask all the time. Yesterday, so I had a packed house at the Alcazar, and instead of what do I want to say, change the question to what do they need to hear?
Hmm.
It's really that simple. What is your and what does the audience need? The audience needs to hear an idea because ideas change everything.
So when you were introducing this young man that you introduced, what was your idea? And what happens for me inside is the audience, if I, and I'm just putting myself in your shoes to the best of my ability, the audience, I would feel like the audience needs to have some sense of what this young man has gone through and who he is.
Mm,
Is that the story that they
yeah,
need?
yeah. Depth and breadth and hard work and creativity and excellence. You know, you may not have some friend may have invited you to come with them last night to hear him, and he sang the whole album, and it was magical. It was 45 minutes, and then he did a Grateful Dead set after the
Mm,
intermission. It was magical, and to listen, really listen to the words that he was speaking about his life, because his the songs were deeply painful and got you a sense inside his soul,
mm,
and that But I didn't want to take up a lot of time because it wasn't about me. It's about us being there to listen to him. But I wanted to kind of set the table to say, this young man who 8 years ago stepped onto a stage to sing his first song is now here to present his first album. Thank you very much. I could have said as little as that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at the clock, my friend, and we have run out of time. No more words.
So one of the pieces that I love what you just said. One of the pieces I want to leave people with is when we are looking at what our intention is, especially in relationship, is to and especially if men are listening to this, women also, but men, is look into your heart to find out what your intention is when you speak.
I love that. I love you, my friend.
I love you so much. Thank
I
you.
know.